Hello, good morning. Students have been requesting me to upload a lecture series on postcolonialism, as we affectionately call POCO studies. Uh, and and okay, finally I have decided that okay, I'll upload my first series on postcolonial studies here in YouTube, and there you go. Basically, post-colonial studies could be broadly divided into ethnic studies, minority studies, African American literature, Caribbean literature, South American literature, Third World studies, Native American literature, Dalit studies, Australian Aboriginal literature, Indian writing in English. Now, postcolonialism as a critical method uh, uh, respects historical differences among former colonies. Now, let me quote Derek Walcott: "Servitude to the muse of history has produced a literature of recrimination and despair, a literature of revenge written by the descendants of slaves, or a literature of remorse written by the descendants of masters." Now, this violence that Walcott is talking about is a kind of violence that could be divided into five subcategories: epistemic violence, cultural violence, as I would like to call almost a vultural violence, because culture often becomes a bit of a vulture over there. Economic violence, political violence, uh, and obviously the coercive violence that you would like to call uh, mm, military violence. Now, this is roundabout the almost a history, or should I say the history of third world. Now, therefore, Poco seeks to establish a kind of egalitarian world order, as it were. Now, the word colony or colony has come from 14th century term and was derived from Latin colonus, or farmer, or planter, cultivator, settler in a new colony. Now, initially, the ruling class was not a priority. Now, initially, ruling class was not necessarily a priority, and their better life was being sought. They were looking for a better life. Initially, they were not looking to settle somewhere, establish, and sell the natives down the river. No, initially they might have been looking for a better life. Should I say better life? Now, the migration of the Puritans from England to the New World, in the 17th century example, could go a long way towards having a history of Western colonization. Now, therefore, colonization and operates along three, or should I say four lines: oppression, inequality, racism, and exploitation. Now, the destruction of the native cultures was a kind of a significant alterations and the hybrid forms. These are the segments that are to be discussed. Remember that, because I might come back to this this aspect of third space, or the hybridization, or the theory of hybridity, probably in the later series of this post-colonial series lectures. Now, non-European cultures and knowledge were disciplined. Now, colonialism, or should I say the kind of a cultural or vultural violence, something that we associate with Warren Hastings, something that we associate with Thomas Babington Macaulay in his famous or infamous minutes. Now, English language and literature, they always, now this is where post-colonial studies become fun. Because English race or the Western culture, they had always tried to give us a myth, kind of a false consciousness of what should I call, of modernization, of false consciousness or a myth of progress, almost being westernized, being enlightened, being modernized in the sense of enlightenment terminology, means being civilized, means being cultured, means being educated, means qualified. Otherwise, you are left in the lurch. Why am I saying you are left in the lurch? Because otherwise, you would be called savage if you are not English. You would be called monster. You would be called primitive. You would be called barbaric if you are not enlightened in the 18th century industrial enlightenment terminology. So, are you Christian? Are you white? Are you aware of English literature? Are you aware of the fluency of English language? Do you know the great Western culture? Yes, I do. Then obviously you are not savage. You are enlightened. You are modern, and you are progressive, because Western civilization successfully exported this myth of progress, history, and modernity, this enlightenment myth, and they have taken clearly the Mickey out of you and sold the natives down the river. Now, this is where racism creeps into the theoretical parlance, and development of being measured through European parameters. Now, it is the European parameter, the European index by which your culture, whether you at all cultured or civilized or not savage, would be assessed, measured, and analyzed. So this index or this Western parameter is something that is culturally interpolated into the natives, into the South African, into the Latin Americans, into the Asians, and the settler colonies like say Australia, as it were. Now, and if you refuse to buy this what should I say, this myth of enlightenment, myth of progress, history, and modernity, then your refusal ideologically, culturally, epistemologically, economically, socially, ethnographically converts you into a primitive, into a childlike, effeminate, irrational, irreligious, criminal, unreliable, and almost, what should I say, pathologized. Because this kind of a cholerification or this pathologization of nation is something that is often done. For example, if you ask me to come up with an example, that a cholera back in those days used to be called Asiatic cholera or Asian cholera. So now the COVID-19 is called Chinese virus. So this is how the illness or disease or pandemics often get pathologized as effeminacy, as homosexuality, and almost as nativity. So this is how disease is gendered feminine. Thank you. We'll continue this post-colonial series in the many more lectures to come. So have a good day and thanks for tolerating me.